So
Yeah,
it's a pretty chill podcast. So
I have no doubt. The
yeah,
chillest of all chill. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm honestly super interested because even though, like, I know pieces of like you working at Marvel and everything, I'm excited to hear the full,
All right. Well,
the full Mike Marts story.
strap yourself in. Buckle the seatbelts.
So, can you describe where have you been in your past in comics and in your career, and then what your current job is at AfterShock Comics?
All right. Well, I've sadly, not sadly, but proudly, I can say I've been in this industry a long time. Uh, I mean, in the publishing side of things, it's coming on 30 years. Uh, yeah, which is a bit scary. And if you count comic industry overall, it's been probably 31 years. Because I started in college. I worked at a comic book store that was like a town away from where I lived, and that was kind of like a a dream of mine at the time. Like
Mhm.
I would go into this comic book store in Greenbrook, New Jersey, and uh, like every other time I was in there, I'd ask the boss there. I would be like, hey, are you hiring? Do you have any spots available? Can I work here? And he was just starting off, and for a while he was like, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah.
And then
Leave me alone, kid.
yeah, exactly. And then at one point I switched cars.
Oh, you tricked
And
him?
well, it's so I had like a Camaro that I had to sell, and then I bought a Jeep Cherokee, this
Nice.
huge piece of shit. And I pull up in the parking lot, and the owner of the comic book store sees it, and I walk in, and he's like, "Hey, you still want that job?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "All right, well, listen, you can have the job, but I see you got that big Jeep out there. Part of your job is going to be going to pick up like comic collections that I buy at various locations. And also, you're going to have to drive to the distributor not once, but twice a week to pick up the new books." And at the time, the distributor was Heroes World, and they were in Randolph. So it was like, I don't know, like a good hour away.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, like, sign me up. And
Who knew the Jeep would have given you the
I
golden
know.
ticket?
And trust me, Teddy, this was the biggest piece of crap ever. But it helped to get me the job. And I was in college at the time, and I was I was at Trenton State College, which is now College of New Jersey, and
Yeah.
I I didn't live there, so I commuted to the college every day. So I already had a really good schedule where I lumped all of my classes into like 2 days of the week. Like I was only there like, let's say, Mondays and Thursdays.
Hmm.
And the other 3 days and Saturday I would work at the comic book store. So I basically had a full-time job at the comic book store while going to school full time. I worked and I
That's a pretty
studied.
solid setup.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
So
and yeah, go
was
ahead.
was that the was that kind of how you got into comics? Like, did you grow up reading them? Because like
Yeah,
when I never grew up reading them, so like the only reason I got into them was like basically you actually. So you grew up reading them, like,
I did.
uh,
Yep. I wouldn't say a lifelong fan, but around age 10, I met my future stepbrother and stepsister. And when I went to their house for the first time, they had what I thought was the most comics I'd ever seen in my entire life. They had like 300 comics in their living room.
now you have that like in your closet.
Yeah, it's yeah. And and I loved going to their house. I would just sit down and just read all these comics. It was everything. It was all Marvel stuff, and it was X-Men and Avengers and Spider-Man, and everything under the sun. So it was a great introduction to comics. And I quickly started a collection of my own, and my collection then started to surpass and be much larger than their collection. And I just became a lifer in terms of uh, reading comics, and Marvel was my main thing. And all throughout my teenage years, I was like the kid who played on the football team, but then went home and secretly
Read
read his
comics.
comics. Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
were
So I
hiding.
mean,
You were
I
hiding
wasn't
your talent.
hiding, but I just didn't advertise it that much. And funnily enough, one of my good friends that I made in high school, um, we were in the gym one day and we like raced each other to the top of the bleachers, and we got to the top, and one of us said like, that was like Spider-Man. And the other guy said like, you know who Spider-Man is? And then I realized that, I had another friend who read comics. So
Oh,
yeah, I mean, back then it wasn't something that you really showed off, or we're proud of. It was just kind of a thing that you did on the side. And I had my few friends that read comics, and I was very close with them, and we talked about them a lot, and trade stories, and went to the small conventions back then. But you know uh yeah, so I grew up loving comics, reading comics, and the desire to work at the comic book store was just another extension of that, just to be around comics all day long. And it was good because not only could I can make sure I wouldn't miss out on hot comics that would sell out, because I
yeah.
was there. But it also helped me like build my collection of back issues, older issues. Sometimes I would prefer to get paid in uh, comics than money. Um, so it kind of helped me build my collection. And throughout college, I eventually kind of gravitated towards writing and journalism. I became a journalism major at Trenton State, and um, studied writing. And I really wanted to be a writer. Uh, and in my college career, I would focus heavily on submitting stories to Marvel Comics. So I set myself a goal of writing a new original story for Marvel Comics, one a week. And
Wait, and you're sending them in once a week?
yeah, once a week. Yeah, I still have them. They're all like sitting behind me in a file here.
Oh
Um,
man,
yeah,
that's like we should
yeah.
like original characters or like original stories
No,
with
no, 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 no. So they had something called their submissions guideline, and
yeah.
it would be like, if you want to submit a story, here's what you got to do. And I followed that, to the T. And um, yeah, one week I would do like a Spider-Man story. The next week I do a Silver Surfer story. The next week I do a Submariner story. I would just mix it up and come up with original ideas and send them in. And I would get these polite rejection letters, with with
Yeah.
the Spidey illustration on it. Basically being like, thanks, but no thanks. We're
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Appreciate you being a fan, but
right, right.
please stop sending us one every week.
Yeah,
Is that what got you into like the didn't you start an internship in college?
yeah. So this process kind of led to that. I was doing this frequently, and a lot. This maybe went on for a year or something like that. And then at the store, at the comic book shop, I met a customer who was also a inker at Marvel. He was an established guy who worked there in the bullpen for a bunch of years and then went freelance. His name was Mark McKenna, and he lived in my town. He was such a nice guy, and he loved coming in, talking shop to me, and telling me about Marvel. And I really kind of just grew to love the idea of what it would be like working at Marvel. And
Yeah.
he became friends enough with me that he offered to like hand deliver some of my stories to the editors at Marvel.
Oh.
And so he did that, and actually I got some great feedback
With
from
Spider-Man
two
rejection.
from two editors that I'm still friends with, today, Fabian Nicieza and Ralph Macchio,
Oh, yeah.
both guys that worked at Marvel for a long time. And to me, that was, this was authentic. It wasn't just the rejection letter from the submissions editor. This was real feedback from an editor. And that really helped my writing. And at this time, I just wanted to be a writer. And Mark McKenna told me about the Marvel Internship program, which I had no idea existed. And
That probably blew your mind.
it did. It blew my mind, and I suddenly saw this as an opportunity for me and something I should try out for. And I checked with my journalism professor, and he said I could receive credit for doing it. So I signed up, hoping that I would get in. And a few months later, there was a phone call at the comic book shop, and my boss answered it, and he was like, "Hello." Okay. And then he turned to me and was like, "Mike, it's Marvel Comics." And I was like, oh shit.
Wait,